our parliament. He empowered the judiciary. We got the Chapter 15 commissions established. We made progress on the war of corruption, but we have not succeeded. It has just moved to, it has mutated. And so I think as long as we are constantly, as a nation, working towards perfection, then that is a good thing. It's when it has told that we should worry about it. But as I keep saying, I think our saddest moment is that we focused on changing the constitution instead of focusing on the development agenda that had started very well. Okay.
You have somebody who's supporting that constitutional reform. Let me bring in Senator Kasanga on this one very quickly, because as you said, you're a key proponent of BBI and the good that it will deliver to the people. But when you speak about the here and now, Senator Kasanga, we're talking about a government that's heavily in debt, IMF ringing the bell saying that we need to look at this. CS yesterday, CS Yatani, asking for a higher debt ceiling, I think extending it to probably 12 trillion. Shouldn't we be asking those questions, especially now, if this spirit of the BBI is anything to go by, and rein it back in, because clearly our debt isn't sustainable in the trajectory that we are going, Senator?
That's true. I don't know in which, I think there's a platform we spoke during the International Anti-Corruption Day that happened late last year. And we have to admit, and we have to say it as it is, corruption has bore its worst in this country. And that's a conversation we must continually have. And when we spoke about the anti-corruption, during the Anti-Corruption Day, you know, we spoke about budgeted corruption, because we keep wondering, where is this money going? And yet we have all sorts of instruments in our constitution that are supposed to, you know, take care of taxpayers' money. We have the Auditor General's Office, we have the Controller of Budget Office, and, you know, all the other stopgap measures that have been put to ensure that money is prudently used and can be accounted for. But yet we have seen and we have heard, it's hit the headlines, some of the worst corruption cases have actually happened under the watch of the Jubilee government. And the question then remains, where is the problem? Besides the goodwill of the people who sit in these offices to ensure that, you know, money is prudently used and accounted for, what else? What else can Kenyans possibly do? You know, budgeted corruption is where, you know, corruption money is put in the budget, so you never quite get to see where the money goes, and then it's paid out when the projects are being executed, when, you know, large infrastructure projects are being executed, you know, and things like that. And you heard about kickbacks. I think there was one general of the Jubilee government who actually said it on national TV, that that it is true they would seek for kickbacks when they're negotiating for, you know, contracts, you know, government to government contracts. And, you know, that was shocking to hear it come from a senior political person in the Jubilee government, that those are some of the things that they were doing. So the fact remains, corruption has been the reason why we find ourselves in, largely, very largely, is the reason why we are here. And going forward, you know, what then must be done? First, the government, of course, has to cut down on its expenditure massively. We have to see the CS of Treasury, before telling us that he wants an increase on the debt ceiling, what has he done to cut on expenditure? We must see a very active, you know, cutting on expenditure happening. This year, for instance, as hard as this year is for Kenyans, by the way, somehow government spending must be cut. And we must see a very active, you know, drive towards cutting expenditure before we can even begin to think of extending that debt ceiling. As it is, you know, there are a lot of loans that are coming to fruition, so Kenyans have to pay for loans of some of the infrastructure projects that we had borrowed. So again, that is going to weigh heavily on Kenyans. And let's not forget the shilling is weakening against the dollar. That's another burden that is hitting Kenyans heavily at a year that we've already suffered so much in the middle of a pandemic. So I think I can just say that we are where we are, and that's a fact. When we look back, we can see how we got ourselves here. We can see where the rain started beating us. And, you know, there's no need to sugarcoat it. It is what it is. But going forward, what do we do? You know, going forward, then what do we do? We can say we are looking forward to an election where we can deal with some of the characters through an elective process. We can say that we are looking forward to BBI that is going to strengthen some oversight roles, for instance, and probably expand, you know, leadership to a point where we can have a few more leaders up there who can now keep checking on each other, hopefully. You know, we can look for all those mechanisms and say we are looking forward to having these mechanisms go. But as it is, we are here where we are, and some of the immediate measures that the CS of Treasury needs to take for us to see and for us to begin to have some faith in the government is by cutting government expenditure massively. We need to see some restructuring going on right now in government. Yes.
Madam Elachi, it seems like that's a conversation that's either not being had or not being had loud enough, because you'll hear it from time, 1 week, we need to look at this public debt scenario, then it gets down for quite a while, then it comes back yet again. How do we sustain this for quite a while until something is done? Because at this point, with every Kenyan, as of last year, having over 100,000 Kenya shillings in debt, clearly there's a big issue right there.
True, and Jeff, in 2014-15, when I was in the Finance Committee in the Senate, and the chair was Bill Okero, we really begged government not to open these things. In fact, we became enemies because we told them you will put this country in a situation that we will never come out. And today, this is where we are. And if they remember those meetings we had with the teacher, and we kept on saying, do not allow this. Let us think differently on how we would want to invest on even the infrastructure and everything. The first thing I think the government should now tell Kenyans is, one, when we talk of debt, how many loans do we have? We know we have SGR. How many are they? Have we spent all of them? Are we able, those that we have not spent and you're about to start paying the principal, to stop them? Because after all, you're not even spending that money. And you have not even finished finalizing maybe to sign in all the loans on it, because it takes a while. Can we think of that? So that the CS can first look at and go to Parliament, tell Parliament, these are the loans. This is what we have spent. We have not touched on this. Would rather even get into a big fine but return their loans. Then remain with what you have spent. Then now come to the loans that you have spent and now start telling us. I'll go now to the SGR. It is time for Parliament to tell us how much were the wagons, how much were... Nobody bothers, whether they are saying opposition or what. Nobody has taken... There were days parliamentarians will do research and come on the floor of the House to help the country. And you say, look, didn't we spend a lot of money beyond what other countries have spent? Do a research and give Kenyans and tell us we went wrong on this. Therefore, we need to start cutting down and looking at, is the SGR giving us, do we have any benefits? Are they profits? Are they able to repay the loan as we continue using it? Okay. If not, how do we ensure it has profit to pay its loan? Then now we come to the other infrastructure. But you cannot tell me you have this loan, you have this, but none of them. And for example, I'll give you an example. And I know my Jubilee government will wonder why. It's because we are also feeling it is not going right. You cannot tell me we have taken a loan to build a road, then you come. The person who is building the road is that company, yes, but is able to enter into a land in Kenya and take massive maram. Are they paying us the maram? Or is that what we are reducing our debt? In fact, those are the things we needed to have asked ourselves. How much of our natural resources, the soil, the what, that was used to reduce the debt in everything we are doing? Okay. Until we get to be very serious on that, we are going to borrow money now, even maybe to pay salaries. Is it right? Is that where Kibaki left us? No. It is something we need to rethink. We need to, even if you say you want to cut, cutting, it means you're going to entrench. We cannot allow that also. Not in this COVID. Not when we know Kenyans have really suffered. You can't now come in and say you are retrenching. It can't. It will be wrong for us. It will be wrong for the government. But we have to ask ourselves, is there an amnesty in all this money we have stolen that we can start repaying and somebody can start bringing back the money? You know, think of a way, because we've talked of corruption, we will talk until the cows come home. We will talk and say other children are using this. Which governor has put in the account? What has ever happened? Nothing. But is there a way you can bring in a program where you just tell this guy, you have been employed for these years. You have these businesses. For sure this is your profit. For sure this is not yours. Can we have an amnesty? Instead of even having them in court where they just go and they say, I'll pay my lawyers, I'll pay the judge. This is what our country has become, honestly. We cannot say that in 2021. And a few of us, we are not going to allow. We are going to do the research and do everything. We will be coming here and reporting to Kenyans. This is what they spend. Tell us where in the world you can spend this to have this.
Let me get Honorable Shule in on this because she is in Parliament. She's sitting on those seats in the August House. Actually, end of this month, I think we start paying for SGR Nairobi Naivasha. Start paying end of this month on that one. Yeah. And still very many questions, even as we talk about SGR right now. The CS about to come back to Parliament, Honorable Shule, to ask for more money.
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
I think it's good for Kenyans to know this. Last year, Ekure Yatani came to Parliament and he requested to increase the debt ceiling to 9 trillion shillings. I remember he was hard pressed and had to explain himself to members of Parliament. I was chairing the committee at then. He convinced us that at the moment Kenya was borrowing, had domestic borrowing, which they borrow at 9%. He then said that they need to borrow from the bilateral financial institutions overseas, which would bring the interest rate to 1%, which means we wanted to retire domestic loans and borrow international loans that were much cheaper. In order to do that, they needed to improve Kenya's creditworthiness. Right. And what they needed to do that was increase the debt ceiling to 9 trillion. He said, we're not going to borrow up to 9 trillion, but we just need the ceiling for creditworthiness so that we can borrow from international loans. And I remember, even though many MPs were opposed to it, we finally said, if we're going to get cheaper loans, that is better for us. And then if we're going to make the government stop borrowing domestic loans, which would have free money for SMEs and other business people within the country. So he convinced members of Parliament, and it was approved. But I remember him being told, and I did tell him even in my committee, that we would like you to come back to us and give us a list of how many loans you have retired, how much are we borrowing internationally, when is the payback period, when is the grace period, and so on. And he promised that he would come back to Parliament. I have checked because I no longer chair that committee, but I've been informed that he has not come back to make that report. And in fact, rumor has it that they did not even retire domestic loans because there were very big interests in this country who owned the banks and wanted to keep the borrowing by government. So that has not happened. And so the question we should be asking, and I'm looking forward to him coming back to Parliament, because this time, and believe me, on the issue of the debt, most MPs were in agreement, whether they were from opposition or from the government. It was one thing that everyone agreed on, that we can't continue doing this. The same sentiments that Senator Elachi has said. So I'm hoping that if it comes to Parliament this time, I will be on the forefront of lobbying to ensure that the minister first comes and gives us the information on which loans we have, how many, which ones were retired, because we need to know that they actually retired the loans, because they would not be increasing the debt ceiling now if they had retired the domestic loans at that time. In fact, he had a very clear, he made a PowerPoint presentation to the committee of exactly how it would work. And in fact, at that time, he pleaded with us and he said, if we don't retire domestic loans, if you don't increase the debt ceiling, then Kenya is going to shut down. Yeah. That is what they told us. So we believe that the country was coming to an economic collapse at that time. And on that reason, MPs agreed to vote for increasing of the debt ceiling. But it was only for creditworthiness, not to get to 9 trillion. At that time, I think we had brought it up to 5.7 trillion. So I can't understand why he wants to go to 12 trillion now. Right. But it means he was dishonest in the first place. Okay. And I think he's going to have a rough time. Because on this one, MPs are united.
Okay. Senator Kasanga, I'll come to you on this one as well. We're inching closer to the tail end of the show right here. Even as it stands, some people are saying, you know what, let's now build bridges to economic prosperity. Kenyans have lost jobs, businesses have closed. Really, the last thing they want is to talk about how we're going to rejig executive structure or anything else. How can I get my business back on track? How can I get my job back? As we start a new year, of course, signatures being verified by IEBC, is that still top on the priority list from where you stand as a country right now with all that's going on?
Two things there you've spoken to, but the first being the political process. The political process, I believe, must go on. I believe the political process must go on because certain things need to be done prior to the 2022 election. And it is good for us that they're done before, so that they set the stage then for a different election and different electoral cycle come 2022 to 2027. So that must continue. Does it bear on the economy? I believe it does bear on the economy. There's no political process that doesn't bear on the economy. I've run my professional business for about 20 years, and I can tell you every electoral cycle, things tend to just come to a standstill. Investors will shy away and wait to see the outcome of it. I think the only difference that maybe Kenyans can hope for and can look back and say, okay, fine, let's let this thing happen, is because of the fact that we do have the handshake in place. And the two principles of the handshake have been very clear on their intentions of where they want this process to go. It's a uniting process. It's a process that is supposed to cool temperatures down. It's a process that's supposed to give us a lot more prosperity come the next electoral cycle through the inclusivity that it promises. So I think because of that angle, then Kenyans have to allow the political process to happen. And again, now it is for the instruments that are in place to oversee these processes that we don't see wastage of resources, that we see prudent use and accountability of resources. That way Kenyans can have again the faith that Kenyans have lost. Kenyans have lost a lot of faith in the administration as it is. So that faith needs to be recreated by seeing how well they are going to handle themselves through this political process that must happen. So I think that is my take. And then Kenyans, we have to just brace ourselves. COVID is still here, and COVID is going to be here with us for a while, because by the time everyone is vaccinated, it's going to be probably even next year. Even, you never know. We are not sure when we shall get the vaccination. So it remains that COVID is still here. We have to keep to the protocols. We have to watch out for our own health, as much as we can, because again, what use are you if you're unhealthy or if you're sick? You cannot work. So we have to put our health first, protect ourselves as far as we can, so that then we can go back and do some work. We cannot just sit at home. We all have to get back to work and, get some productivity going. Okay. And I always say Kenyans, yes, sorry.
Let me jump in there very quickly, because as you said, there's some things that need to be put in place, before 2022. And I just wanted to reiterate, because Honorable Shule was asking, what are these pressing things that have to be done before next year, politically that is?
Before the electoral. Well, the BBI is promising, the executive has to look in a different way. Parliament is differently constituted. Senate is differently constituted. So if we don't get this constitutional amendment, if we don't get the constitutional amendment done right now, then we shall not have those benefits coming at the time of the election. And I'll tell you this, and I've said this before, especially the fact that we have women in Senate, for me, is such a big, big deal. Because the oversight role that Senate has over the counties, where people are, that's where Kenyans are, we need the women to sit in that national position to oversight the entire budget of each and every county and make sure that women and children affairs at the county level are well budgeted for and the monies are accounted for. So for me, I'm a big proponent, and I say we have to get the constitutional amendment done this year so that by next year, women can also go to the election for Senate. Then the expansion, of course, of the parliament and all the other promises that we have in the BBI. So that is why it has to come ahead. It cannot be done at the time of the election, because then we will not get that benefit happening. So that is where I stand on that matter.
Okay, Speaker Elachi, let me come to you. You have 2 minutes before we actually close this off. And something interesting we've seen with the president, especially during this term, is the increasing reliance on the military for non-military duties. We've seen what's happened in Nairobi, and he's spoken about it severally. He said they're very efficient, they do the job the way it's supposed to be done. And some analysts, albeit tongue-in-cheek, are saying that if that's the case, we should just take the OP, drive down the road Hurlingham, and have it at DOD. Let all government operations start from there, because this seems to be the only place that is not corrupt. As he said, they get jobs done within budget, within time. Is that what we need to do? Look at an increasing militarization, so to speak, of services.
Allow me to say one thing. When the president took the oath of office, he promised to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of Kenya. It is not his place to decide whether the military can run the operations better. It is the Constitution that decides how he runs the operations of the country. So we must return that. Okay. It is not his decision. It is the Constitution of Kenya, right, which says that the sovereignty belongs to the people of Kenya. So do you feel it is exercised on behalf of the people of Kenya.
Do you feel at this point he's contravened
that conversation, we are losing it as Kenyans. We must remember the president is not the almighty. He has to follow the Constitution.
At this point, do you feel he is not following it? You thought he's done so far?
Yes, I have written an opinion actually in the local dailies where I said some of the where he has failed to follow the Constitution because I want history one day to say that I was right.
What's your take on that, Elachi, as we close?
Well, first of all, let me just say I agree with Kasanga. For Jubilee to achieve what they want, they will need peace. Stability is very critical. Let them, they went into this. The president has to follow and just do the right thing. BBI has to go through and pass for stability of this country. Having said that, I think the military they are Kenyans. It is us who have lost our values completely in how we look at attitudes and how we look at government money and how we behave with government money, thinking it is just money not from Kenyans, but we pick it somewhere. And that is why you find that the budget of, if you give an officer who has gone through military a budget and tell him, we want this, he will reduce first of all the budget and return your money and say this is enough. So let us be very honest. I have worked with Badi. I can tell you, when he tells you a hospital will cost this, you will hear madness from Health, Ministry of Health. You will be surprised. Yet they will do the same job and they will finalize in due time. You will not do the same job. We were told hospitals will be open when? The military was going to give us before Christmas. Ministry of Health has moved up to now. We have never seen even one finished. So let us just say we have failed our country. So if we have our young Kenyans who have gone through the military process and they are able to come and help us, please let them come and help Kenya and let us help. We are talking about debt. We need them to come and reduce and tell us, you can do this road with this amount. They've done for us the road on Kirinyaga Road. You ask them what they have spent and what we spend on roads, you'll be so surprised. So for me, it is not that the president went because he would wish. It is the frustration you go through. And he had to rethink and ask himself, these are Kenyans. They are officers, yes, but they were trained. They are engineers. They are everything. They are not just military. They are, first of all, Kenyans. They decided that's their career. But it is a career where they have values and patriotism in respecting their country.
I think that's where we'll have to leave it as far as this conversation is concerned. Clearly, a lot more can be said on it, but that's why we draw the curtains on this. Thank you so much for making time this morning, Speaker Elachi. Asante sana. Honorable Boss Shelley, thank you so much. First time here, hoping to have you plenty of more times on the show. Asante sana.
Thank you for having me.
And for joining the conversation via Skype, Senator Kasanga, asante sana for making time as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's where we draw the curtains on this one. As always, the conversation continues online. You can get me at I am Jeff Mote. We take a short break. Back on the other side as we get interactive. Don't go too far. Good morning.